Tonight, I wanted to talk to you guys about the Skinwalker Ranch, also known as the Gorman or Sherman Ranch, in the remote areas of Utah. I'm not going to tell you the exact location, although you can find it online, but please don't go there. Don't go investigate it. Leave this place alone. It's all private property. But a lot of you guys probably have heard about the Skinwalker Ranch and a lot of the strange, crazy things that have happened there and how it goes through periods and years of dormancy, and then it seems to act up again. And also the story of how it's changed hands over the years. So what it is, it's a pretty nonchalant as far as physical attributes go ranch in Utah where they graze cattle, and it's kind of high desert, oak scrub kind of an area. Nothing too out there, but what makes this place remarkable is all the strange stories that have happened over the years from the previous owners, especially during the time when the Sherman family, we'll call them, not their real names, were occupied at that ranch. And I guess they bought it in the early 90s and had their cattle there. They're exclusively cattle ranchers. And then they experienced everything from cryptid activity, Bigfoot, wolf like creatures, dogman like creatures, disembodied voices talking to them, to poltergeist activity in the house, to strange lights in the skies, to UFOs and orbs and creatures looking into windows. Everything possibly paranormal you can imagine has happened at this ranch at one time or another. And as you can imagine, a family with kids just trying to be normal people, not paranormal people, this would scare you to death. Strange, interesting things like locks on doors being unlocked. In fact, when the Sherman family bought it from an older lady, they noticed that there were chains by the front and back door where she had dogs tied up all the time, and big curtains over all the windows, almost like she was a prisoner in her house at night. So there's a lot of information out there. I'm not going to go into every detail. It's absolutely fascinating. We could talk for hours about it. This video is going to be long enough already, probably one of my longer ones. So hang in there. We get to some good stuff at the end, some of the points I want to make. So the Shermans had it and went through all this strange stuff and all the things that happened. We're going to detail that a little bit later on. And then Robert Bigelow from Bigelow Aerospace. He's actually a pretty interesting guy if you know a little bit about his background. He's basically a billionaire industrial guy, pretty much a genius too. He's pretty clever. And he formed the National Institute for Discovery Science, or NIDS. And he bought this ranch when he heard all the stories, and he bought it for the reason to document and scientifically study the things that happened at the ranch. Well, lots of strange things happened once they bought it, but a lot of the activity calmed down, or it just was nearly impossible to document. And it's pretty fascinating that the more you go in there with technology, and we're talking top technology, thermal and audio equipment and cameras, all that stuff. There's a pretty good book out there. George Knapp, who's a host on Coast to Coast AM, where I first heard about this, and I've been studying this case for almost 20 years now since it kind of became public knowledge. There's a lot of good stuff. Now, the name Skinwalker comes from a lot of people trivia to Navajo, which they're the ones that came up with the term Skinwalker. But a lot of Indian tribes have this same kind of demonic, witch-like creature who can shapeshift and possess people and do bad things, generally as a kind of a dark magic, kind of an evil type entity or creature, kind of like a witch doctor type of thing, as opposed to like a shaman, and be seduced by dark magic and can change its form and play tricks on people and just generally not that great. So they call it the Skinwalker Ranch. And the natives knew that you don't go to where this ranch was, to where this plateau was, because it was a definite area of terror, of bad things, of we just don't go there, even though no matter how nice it is or how good the hunting might be. It's just one of those forbidden places. And that kind of gets us into the high strangeness of the place. Some of the things that I was talking about, we're going to look into a little bit more in a little bit more detail here. One of the first things that when after NIDS bought it, I know we're kind of going in reverse order from sequence of events, but is they would set up cameras, and the cameras would unplug themselves or turn off, or they'd have problems with these cameras, or something strange would happen and that section of film would be missing from from the camera footage that they had. And they put two cameras facing each other, like camera looking at camera, so nothing could sneak up behind one camera, and they'd mysteriously turn off, or things would happen just off camera. So it was really like whatever was there, whatever forces at work were really avoiding being caught, almost to the point of where they were like screwing with and messing with the people studying. Now, if we go back in time to when the Gormans took over and turned it into a cattle ranch, they had a lot of cattle mutilations. They had dogs and pets that went chasing after creatures and ended up being zapped and turned into like a puddle of goo. They had, all the classic cattle mutilation where stuff was dissected and torn apart, but there would be no blood, eyes missing. If anybody's familiar with the cattle mutilation phenomenon across the USA, that's pretty interesting because a lot of these rural ranchers, this is their livelihood. It's not like they had a carrot farm and they had a couple cows. This is what they did. They had their prize bulls and they had their steers and they sold them for meat and they sold them for stud purposes to breed out. So this was pretty much their livelihood. So when they would have, $8,000 or $10,000 bull go missing, especially in the early '90s, $8,000 or $10,000 was even more money back then. That's a huge loss. Now, speaking of the cattle, one of the real interesting stories that stuck out to me is that they had a group of bulls. I don't remember the exact number. I think it was 5 or 6 bulls, something like this, all in an area. And they all went missing. They couldn't figure out what happened to them. It's like there was no signs of being cattle rustled or any of that other kind of stuff, or how could, the gate was locked. It's like they just got sucked into the air and vanished. Well, there was a large trailer next to where all these bulls were, and they were all in there. They couldn't believe it. They were all crammed in there, and they were all in a trance-like state, like shoved in there like a pack of hot dogs. And Sherman, the main guy, said you couldn't get one of these bulls in there if your life depended on it, much less all of them in there. And it was just one of those, like, they weren't harmed. It was just one of those to like completely mess with the family, to show you don't know what was going on. The other thing in the main house is they had a lot of, shadow figure type stuff going by windows, glowing eyes in the darkness, things peeking at them. And then they also had poltergeist activity, stuff where, faucets would turn on, lights and lamps would turn on, stuff would fall off of shelves. They would draw all the window curtains shut, and then in the morning they would all be open again mysteriously. There'd be 4 or 5 deadbolts and padlocks on a door. They'd all be locked. You'd get up in the morning and they'd all be locked and the door would be wide open or something like that. Just very strange poltergeist, demonic, physical type entity stuff that makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. It's one thing to have stuff on your property moving around, but you shut the door, you feel secure in your house, but have it inside the house too. It's amazing these people stayed there for as long as they did before they sold it to NIDS. The other thing was, going to the other spectrum of the paranormal world, is they had a lot of UFO and lights, strange orbs that would follow people around at night, that would follow other cryptids around, strange lights that would, like a glowing basketball orb light, like we've discussed on his channel, would just appear in a window and fly off again. So very odd. The orb thing is something that's been documented, I know, with Bigfoot, and people talk about it. One of the stories that fascinates me is this particular instance wasn't a dog man, but when they first moved in there, they had this large dog wolf thing, like 200-pound, big as they get, giant wolf came up to him and actually seemed fairly friendly. I think there was even a report of one of the kids petting it. I don't know. Like, it was this giant dog, but it seemed friendly. Well, I guess it went over and started chewing on one of the calves, or I think it was a goat or some kind of another animal, and he started throwing rocks at it and get it chasing away. Well, Sherman went in and grabbed like a 300 Win Mag, or I think it was a 7mm, some very strong, high-powered rifle, something, like a moose gun, and shot this thing, and it just kind of like, and kind of shrugged it off. And he shot it multiple times, and it seemed very unaffected by it, and I think it started to get slightly aggressive and growl. But when they blew big chunks out of it, they would go over and they noticed the flesh smelled rotten and had flies, but it had just been blown out of this dog like a few minutes ago. So I guess it could be physically harmed, but not killed. It was very, very strange encounter. The other thing is they saw Bigfoot creatures. They'd be looking in the window at night. They'd be running across the fields. They would see them in general, kind of some of the standard Bigfoot activity. If they were there naturally or passing through, or if they have something to do with the other paranormal activity that goes on there, I don't know. I know we do a lot, mostly Bigfoot stuff on here. So it's kind of interesting that Bigfoot shows up in the middle of all this. If there was a native Bigfoot, he's probably like, I'm out of here with all these crazy lights. Or, some of the more interdimensional theories about Bigfoot are kind of interesting. One of the stories I remember hearing was that, there'd be out in the field, there'd just be these two dogmen like creatures standing there smoking cigarettes, talking to each other in some language they couldn't understand. Like two upright, dog headed men, just very bizarre, talking to each other like, hey, what are you doing here? Like, just very, very strange. So they did have reports of dogman creatures and very anthropomorphic, very human-like behaviors doing things on the ranch. I found that very odd because I know we talk about dogmen and they have a lot of very animalistic, like a pack of canines, just upright type of activity. But they reported dogman-like creatures, but acting a lot more human. The other thing is they had a lot of UFO activity. They'd get the cigar-shaped craft. They'd get the classic saucer-shaped craft fly over and hover over. And it looked like they were coming in and out of like portals and other things in the sky or jumping to light speed or whatever it is. So plenty of strange things, big disembodied voices that would be thundering over their house, almost like they were laughing at him and mocking him. And he'd be like, I can hear you. And the voices in the sky would just stop laughing, like somebody on a megaphone was floating in the air, but nobody was there. Strange things. There's other reports of stuff like a portal would appear and then something would crawl through the portal and then everything would disappear. Very strange out there stuff going on. There's a lot of information that goes into a lot more detail. If you look up George Knapp on YouTube, there's some pretty good presentations, I think, from like 2007 or 2008 where he goes through a slideshow. It's riveting. Some of the coast-to-coast accounts. I know they had a lot of former military people on there that talked about it as well and people who worked for NIDS. Absolutely fascinating. So some of the things to take away from all the research and things I've heard over the years and things I've read over the years and stuff people have told me over the years about the Skinwalker Ranch, I've come to three major points and three things for you folks to consider tonight. Things that I kind of narrowed down into mostly odd, into what the conclusions can be and what exactly is going on here. And these major points I wanted to pass on to you because I think it's important to realize that there are different spots all over the world that exhibit a lot of these same characteristics for high strangeness. Some to a lesser degree, some to even a higher degree. And as somebody who has experienced paranormal in all the different forms you can imagine, I think it's very important for you folks to think about this stuff. One of the things that's absolutely astounding, and I think the Skinwalker Ranch is the perfect representation of this, is that in the paranormal world, science many times just doesn't work. Now, NIDS, the National Institute for Scientific Discovery, we're talking millions of dollars in the top minds and researchers from military and government, private organizations, cameras, equipment, thermal equipment, temperature, seismic equipment, everything you could possibly imagine, and they weren't able to really capture anything. And those of you who are into Bigfoot here, because I know that's a big part of my audience, it's very hard, almost impossible to go out and get. I'm going to go out and I'm going to find a Bigfoot and I'm going to film it, or I'm going to find direct evidence of them. It's, for all the expeditions, we find some stick structures, which are good. We find hair samples, which are good. We find tracks sometimes, if you're lucky. But it's very hard to get actual footage of Bigfoot. Most of the time it's been by accident. Patterson-Gimlin, yes, they did set out to find a Bigfoot, but at the time they were not expecting to come across one at Bluff Creek there, and they also weren't, really thinking that they were going to find anything. And that's probably like one of the only times I think actually setting out to find one and they found one. And at the time I'd classify that almost as an accident when they came across Patty. But the Sierra Sounds was a hunting camp. All the great evidence, most of the stuff we have like of Bigfoot is like traffic cameras, people filming their kid and they spot something in the background. Very elusive. So there seems to be something in the paranormal world. And not that I'm saying that Bigfoot's paranormal, but I think it's something good to talk about because we all know how frustrating it is trying to document. But especially when you get into ghosts and ufology, studying UFOs and aliens and all the other paranormal type stuff out there, it's incredibly hard to go out and document it. And science is all about repeatability and documentation. So something that is naturally occurring very randomly, almost intelligently controlled, that goes out of its way not to be discovered and almost play tricks on you, that if I set a camera up and you're standing behind that camera, something's going to happen behind you where the camera's not pointing. And when you move the camera, something's going to happen somewhere else. This is time and time again in the paranormal world, which is why it's so frustrating to science. And I think that's a big takeaway here that we need to think about, is that in a lot of these situations, science just cannot explain it. And that's what's so frustrating, because we want science to help us understand these things. But when it's actively trying to deceive science, it's got some very heavy implications, and I want you to think about that. So going in conjuncture with science not working as well as we would want it to document these strange events here at Skinwalker Ranch and in other places, and the study of cryptids and ghosts and all that other kind of stuff that we've talked about, is there seems to be intelligence. There is an intelligent control of this ranch, from people hearing on the ranch disembodied voices, like laughing at them, and then they can say, "We can hear you," shouting up at the sky. Like I said, whenever they would try to document something, something would happen that wasn't there, or it would just stop altogether. There's just a lot of very odd stuff that says that there's some kind of intelligence. There's something watching, like a smoke screen or from like a two-way mirror from like the other side that's right in front of you that you can't see. If it's a parallel dimension or some other kind of force or figure or cloaking or who knows what. I don't think there's a scientific word to describe exactly what's going on, but there seems to be a certain intelligence to the land. One of the stories at Skinwalker that really got me is a guy showed up and wanted to meditate there because he thought it was not a bad place, but a good place. And he went out into the field, and they were really against telling him not to, and he meditated there for a while. And about 15 or 20 minutes in, all of a sudden, he hears something behind him, and coming out of the bushes was a large, hairy, cryptid-like creature. I don't remember if it looked like a dogman or a Bigfoot, but it was something was coming at him, was starting to charge at him, and he ran across the field as fast as he could, and it was coming all the way over him till he hopped inside the house or got in his car and ran away. And I remember him saying, "I'm never coming back here again." And that shows a certain intelligence and almost kind of a sense of humor to have on people. The fact that, like I said, science doesn't document it. And that's always something that's really stuck with me about about paranormal type stuff and the inability to document it. It seems like there's a certain intelligence, like something's pulling the strings, something doesn't want you to know or gives you just enough to keep you intrigued, but not enough for you to document or repeat, which is the basis of science. The other thing that strikes me that goes along with some kind of intelligent control and scientific method being at a loss to document these happenings is there seems to be some kind of a gateway. In some of the stories, watching creatures crawl through what look like a portal, or things opening up in the sky and ships flying into them, and hearing disembodied voices look down at them, and strange creatures and things appearing and disappearing, like some kind of a gateway or a portal or a wormhole or whatever you want to call it. Whether it's a shortcut from another part of the world or into another realm or into an alternate dimension or a parallel dimension. That's way beyond my pay grade to discuss what's going on there. But I honestly don't know. It seems like something's coming through, that these paranormal entities, things that can't be explained, seem to be coming through, and this is a hot spot. And it seems to go through phases of dormancy and phases of when it's really active. So your guess is as good as mine. And how this pertains to the rest of the United States is there seems to be places all over the United States and all over the world that have, from time to time, hotspots. There's also the UFO world has their underground bases and their hotspots. I know the paranormal world has their ghost and haunting and their lights. I know, like where I am, The 29 Palms area is kind of creepy, all the way down to Anza Borrego's got a lot going on. Like the reported underground bases and like Dulce, and then in the Sierra Nevadas, and then up around Yosemite. All over the place, it just seems to be these areas of high strangeness where things happen more than other areas. Although it seems like high strangeness can happen anywhere in your backyard, in your home, in your garage, in anywhere you can think it can happen. But there seems to be certain hot spots, and they seem to be more active at times, less active at times. Maybe as the Earth spins and moves through our galaxy and moves through time, this ebbs and flows. I don't know. Like I said, that's way above my head. I'm, not really educated in astrophysics or how any of this stuff could possibly work. Anyway, I know this is a long video. I spent a lot of time on it. If you feel I deserve it, please give it a thumbs up. Please leave a comment. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that bell. I do appreciate it. I spent a lot of time on this video. This is one of the topics I wanted to talk about ever since I got into YouTube and paranormal type stuff. And I think it was a really good topic to discuss with people, want to have a drink or something like that. And you can really, really get weird on the talking about the Skinwalker Ranch and what it could be. And this is one of those, your guess is as good as mine. It's so fascinating because it brings us all together: UFO people, paranormal ghost people, demonic people, cryptid people, government conspiracy people. It all seems to kind of come together. Anyway, stay safe in the wood, folks.